Bear me a child, and you will be free. The words fell into the candlelit study like a blade laid quietly upon a table. Across from him, Susanna Fairfax, who did not move. The fire crackled behind the tall man standing near the mantel, casting restless shadows over the sharp angles of his face. Society called him the Dragon of Thornwood. A duke whose enemies vanished from influence, from fortune, sometimes from sanity itself. And now he was asking her for a child. No courtship, no romance, only an heir. Susanna clasped her trembling hands together in her lap and forced herself to meet his cold gray gaze. "You propose marriage," she said carefully. "I propose an arrangement." His voice was calm, deliberate, like a man negotiating the purchase of land rather than the future of two lives. "I require an heir," the Duke of Thornwood continued. "You require protection." The words struck with unsettling accuracy, outside the cracked windows of Irebreck Manor. The wind rattled the dying branches of winter trees. The house had once been respectable. Now the carpets were threadbare, the coal bins nearly empty, and the servants fewer every month. Her late husband's brother, Sir Oswald Breck, had made certain of that. And he had made certain Susanna knew exactly how temporary her refuge was. 3 weeks, he had told her. 3 weeks before he expected repayment for his generosity. Her stomach twisted. The Duke's eyes narrowed slightly, as though he had noticed the flicker of fear. "I am aware of your circumstances, Mrs. Fairfax," he said quietly. "Your husband left debts. Your brother-in-law is impatient. You seem remarkably well informed, Your Grace. I make it my business to be." He moved slowly around the room, boots whispering against the wooden floorboards. Even in stillness he radiated power. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in severe black that made him look carved from shadow. A few threads of silver touched the dark hair at his temples. 33 years old, if rumor was correct. Too young to already be feared across England. "And you chose Mia," Susanna said. "Yes." "Why?" The Duke stopped pacing. For a moment he simply studied her. "You are intelligent," he said at last. "You are resilient. You survived 4 years of marriage to Harold Fairfax without losing your dignity." Susanna's throat tightened. Few people spoke of Harold Fairfax kindly. "You do not crave society's approval," the Duke continued. "You have no meddling family, and you possess a talent for surviving unpleasant circumstances." His gaze sharpened. "All qualities I require in a duchess." A duchess. The word felt unreal. Susanna glanced at the thin gloves covering her hands, mended twice at the seams. "You wish me to bear you a child," she said. "Yes." "And when I do?" "Your freedom." The Duke's answer came instantly. "You will receive an allowance of £5,000 a year," he continued. "You will retain your title. You may live wherever you choose in England." He paused. "And no one, including Sir Oswald Breck, will ever trouble you again." Her breath caught. £5,000. Freedom, protection, everything she had spent the last 4 years desperately trying to secure. All in exchange for a single thing. A child. Susanna's heart began to pound painfully against her ribs. Because the Duke did not know. He could not know. 5 years earlier, after months of illness, a physician had delivered a verdict that had destroyed her first marriage. "You are barren, Mrs. Fairfax." The memory still burned. She had spent 4 years watching her husband's affection turn into quiet disappointment, then indifference. And now she sat across from a man who needed the one thing she could never give him. "You would not pretend this marriage is anything else," she said slowly. "No. No affection? No. No expectation of love?" The Duke's mouth curved faintly. "I do not deal in fantasies, Mrs. Fairfax." Silence filled the room. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen grounds. Susanna thought of Sir Oswald's cold smile, of the way his hand had lingered too long on her arm the previous evening, of the locked doors, the empty coal bins, the approaching end of her fragile safety. The Duke watched her quietly, waiting. He did not rush her, did not pressure her, but the power in the room was unmistakable. A bargain had been placed on the table, and Susanna Fairfax had nothing else left to trade. "What are the terms of the marriage?" she asked. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, perhaps. "You will move to Thornwood Park immediately," he said. "The wedding will take place in 3 weeks. You will fulfill your duties as Duchess, and you will attempt to give me an heir." "Attempt." The word settled strangely in the air. "And if I succeed?" "Then our arrangement ends," the Duke said. "You will be free." Freedom. The word echoed in her mind like church bells, but beneath it lay the secret she could not confess, the truth that would end this bargain before it began. She should tell him. She should stand up and walk away. Instead, Susanna Fairfax lifted her chin. "I accept." The Duke did not smile. He simply stepped forward and extended his hand. "Then we have an accord." His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, unyielding. For a moment neither of them spoke. Something passed between them then, something quiet and dangerous. Recognition. Two survivors meeting across the battlefield of society. "Welcome to Thornwood Park," he said. Susanna managed a faint smile. "Thank you, Your Grace." But as she rode away from Breck Manor 3 days later in the Duke's gleaming black carriage, her brother-in-law's last whispered words followed her like a ghost. "He will kill you when he learns the truth." Susanna closed her eyes against the winter sunlight, because she knew something Sir Oswald did not. The Duke of Thornwood might be a dragon, but she had already stepped willingly into his fire, and he still did not know her greatest secret. She might never be able to give him the one thing he wanted most, an heir. The first time Susanna Fairfax saw Thornwood Park, she nearly forgot to breathe. The carriage crested a hill just before sunset, and the estate revealed itself like something from a dream. An immense Palladian mansion of golden stone, its windows blazing with the last light of evening. Behind it stretched manicured gardens, frozen lakes, and dark forests that seemed to run endlessly toward the horizon. It was not simply a house. It was power made visible. Beside her in the carriage, the Duke of Thornwood watched her reaction without comment. "You dislike it," he said after a moment. "I did not say that. You did not have to." Susanna forced her gaze away from the estate. "I have simply never seen anything so large." One corner of his mouth twitched faintly. "That is a common reaction." The carriage rolled beneath an archway where servants already stood waiting. A dozen of them. Footmen in immaculate livery, a stern housekeeper, 2 maids, a silver-haired butler who bowed with perfect precision. Every one of them watched her, assessing, judging, the woman who would soon become their duchess. The carriage door opened. The Duke stepped down first and turned to offer his hand. His touch was steady, possessive. "You are trembling," he murmured quietly. "I am cold." "Liar." Susanna glanced up sharply, but his expression had already returned to its usual composed stillness. Inside the entrance hall, warmth surrounded them instantly. Marble floors gleamed beneath towering chandeliers. Portraits of long-dead Thornwood dukes watched from the walls with solemn authority. It felt less like entering a home, and more like stepping into history itself. The housekeeper curtsied deeply. "Your Grace." Then her gaze shifted to Susanna, Mrs. Fairfax. There was no warmth in the greeting, only calculation. "This is Mrs. Alderton," the Duke said. "She runs the house more effectively than most generals command armies." "I do my best, Your Grace." Mrs. Alderton turned toward Susanna. "We have prepared rooms for you in the East Wing." "For you, not for the Duchess, not yet." Susanna inclined her head politely. "Thank you." A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossed the housekeeper's face before she turned and began leading them through the long corridor. The Duke followed behind them, silent, watching. Susanna could feel his gaze on her back, studying how she moved, how she held herself, as though he were still deciding whether his investment had been wise. The room prepared for her was larger than the entire upper floor of Breck Manor. A massive 4-poster bed draped in green silk, windows overlooking the frozen lake, a fireplace large enough to heat a ballroom. Susanna stood in the center of it all, stunned. "I assume it will suffice," the Duke said from the doorway. She turned slowly. "It is overwhelming. You will grow accustomed to it." "Will I?" His gaze held hers. "Yes." He stepped inside the room then, closing the door behind him. The quiet suddenly felt very intimate. Too intimate. "You should understand something," he said. Susanna waited. "This marriage will not resemble the ones you have observed in society." "I assumed as much. I do not entertain emotional entanglements." His voice remained calm, measured. "I have responsibilities that leave little room for sentiment." She nodded. "I am aware." But he continued, "I will not mistreat you." The words were unexpected. "I have no interest in humiliating a woman simply because she belongs to me." "Belongs." Susanna stiffened slightly. The Duke noticed. His eyes narrowed. "You dislike that word." "I dislike the implication. You are under my protection now." "That is not the same thing." For a moment silence filled the room. Then something strange happened. The Duke smiled, very slightly. "Perhaps," he said, "I did choose correctly." Susanna blinked. "You prefer a wife who argues with you?" I prefer a wife who does not tremble every time I speak. Her breath caught. He had noticed that too. Of course he had. Nothing about the Dragon of Thornwood unsuggested a man who missed details. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar near his temple. "Tell me something honestly, Mrs. Fairfax," he said quietly. "What? Are you afraid of me?" She hesitated. "Yes." His eyes darkened. "Good." Susanna frowned. That seems an unusual response. Fear encourages honesty, and honesty encourages trust. He studied her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted, softened. "I do not expect love from you," he said. "I doubt I am capable of inspiring it." She swallowed. "I suspect you inspire many emotions, Your Grace. Most of them unpleasant. That depends on the observer." A strange tension filled the room. Something neither of them had expected, something dangerous. The Duke broke the silence first. "The wedding will take place in 3 weeks." "Yes." "Until then you will remain here." "Of course." "And when we marry?" He stopped. Susanna felt her pulse quicken. "When we marry," he finished quietly, "I will expect our arrangement to begin immediately." The meaning was unmistakable. Heat crept into her cheeks, but she forced herself not to look away. "I understand." His eyes searched her face. "Do you?" Susanna drew a steady breath. "I agreed to your terms." The Duke studied her another moment. Then he nodded once. "Very well." He turned toward the door, but just before leaving he paused. "One more thing." Susanna looked up. "When you bear my child," he said quietly, "you will be free to leave this house forever." The words echoed in the enormous room. Freedom. That was the promise. That was the bargain. But as the door closed behind him, Susanna sank slowly onto the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled again, because the Duke had no idea what he had truly purchased. He believed he had chosen a woman capable of giving him an heir. But Susanna Fairfax carried a secret that could destroy everything, and when the Dragon of Thornwood had discovered the truth, freedom might not be the outcome. The wedding took place on a gray Tuesday morning. No London crowds, no glittering aristocratic spectacle, just a quiet ceremony in the private chapel at Thornwood Park. The Duke had insisted upon it. "I see no reason to parade our arrangement before society," he had said the night before with typical bluntness. Susanna had not argued. In truth, the quiet suited her. The chapel itself was breathtaking. Arched stone ceilings, stained glass windows that cast soft rivers of color across the floor, and rows of polished oak pews that smelled faintly of age and candle wax. Only a handful of witnesses were present. The Duke's solicitor, 2 elderly servants, and one woman Susanna had never met. She sat in the front pew like a queen observing a curious experiment. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, eyes sharp as cut glass. The Dowager Duchess of Thornwood, the Duke's mother. Susanna felt that gaze on her the entire ceremony, not hostile, but intensely evaluating, as though she were a puzzle yet to be solved. The bishop cleared his throat and began the vows. Susanna barely heard them. Her attention kept drifting to the man beside her, Crispin Mercer, Duke of Thornwood. Tall, imposing, dressed in severe black that made him look more like a judge than a groom. When he spoke his vows, his voice was steady and emotionless. A contract being finalized, not a heart being offered. And yet, when Susanna glanced up at him, she found his eyes already watching her. Cold gray, sharp, but not indifferent. Never indifferent. "You may kiss the bride." The bishop's words echoed softly through the chapel. The Duke stepped closer. His hand came up beneath Susanna's chin. Warm, gentle. He tilted her face toward his. For a brief moment they simply looked at each other, and Susanna felt something shift. Not affection, something stranger. Awareness. Then he kissed her. It was brief, controlled, but not cold. When he pulled back, his expression had changed almost imperceptibly. Something in his gaze had cracked like ice under sudden pressure. Then the mask returned. "Come," he said quietly. "We have guests." The wedding breakfast was a restrained affair. A long table in the dining room, silver gleaming beneath candlelight. Polite conversation that felt more like negotiation than celebration. Susanna sat beside her new husband at the head of the table. Across from them, the Dowager Duchess watched everything, every glance, every movement. Finally, after the meal ended, the older woman spoke. "You are not what I expected." Susanna folded her hands calmly. "What did you expect, Your Grace?" "A foolish girl dazzled by my son's fortune." The dowager's gaze sharpened. "Instead, he has married a woman who looks at him as though she is measuring him." Susanna blinked. "That would be unwise." "Perhaps." The older woman leaned back slightly. "Tell me, Do you know why they call my son the dragon? Because he destroys his enemies. That is part of it. The dowager's smile was thin. But the truth is simpler. She lowered her voice. My son despises men who harm women. Susanna went very still. When Crispin hears of such things, the dowager continued calmly, he removes the problem. How to consider it? Systematically. The dowager leaned closer. You see, Susanna, my son witnessed certain things as a child. Things that made him very particular about cruelty. Her eyes glittered. Your brother-in-law, for instance. Susanna's pulse jumped. Sir Oswald Breck has been on my son's list for 2 years. The words struck like thunder. Crispin married you partly because it was the most efficient way to remove you from his reach. The room suddenly felt very small. He knew about Sir Oswald? Of course. The dowager studied her closely. My son researches everything that interests him. A chill crept through Susanna, because if the Duke had researched everything, then surely, he does not love you, the dowager added calmly. The words landed like a blade, but he has chosen to protect you. Her gaze softened just slightly. For Crispin Mercer, that is the closest thing to love he has ever known. Susanna did not answer. She could not, because one terrible realization had begun forming in her mind. If the Duke had chosen her partly to protect her, then her deception was worse than she had feared. She had not merely tricked a man into marriage. She had lied to the only man who had ever tried to save her. And when the dragon of Thornwood High discovered the truth, that his carefully chosen duchess could never give him the heir he needed, protection would not be the outcome. Their wedding night arrived with a quiet inevitability Susanna had been dreading since the moment she accepted the Duke's offer. The servants had prepared the High Duchess's bedchamber with ceremonial care. Candles glowed along the marble mantel. Fresh linen scented with lavender covered the vast four-poster bed. The air was warm, almost stifling. Susanna stood beside the window in her white nightgown, staring out at the moonlit gardens of Thornwood Park. Her hands would not stop trembling. Soon the Duke would come. Soon the bargain would truly begin, and she would be stepping deeper into a lie she could not undo. The door opened quietly behind her. Your maid has been dismissed. His voice, low, controlled. Susanna turned. The Duke of Thornwood stood inside the room holding a single candle. His dark hair was loose, his coat gone, leaving him in a simple white shirt and dark waistcoat. Without the armor of his usual attire, he looked different, more human, but the intensity in his gray eyes remained unchanged. Are you frightened? He asked. Susanna hesitated. Should I be? His gaze softened almost imperceptibly. No. He set the candle on the bedside table. I will not force you. The word startled her. If you require time, I do not. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I agreed to this marriage knowing your expectations. Yes, he said quietly, but agreement is not the same as willingness. The honesty of that statement caught her off guard. He stepped closer, not abruptly, not like a man claiming his rights, but slowly, carefully, close enough now that she could feel the warmth of his body. You are shaking, he murmured. I am cold. He studied her for a moment. You are lying again. Susanna gave a soft, helpless laugh. You are disturbingly observant. I must be. His voice lowered slightly. A duke who fails to observe his surroundings rarely remains a duke for long. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence felt strange, charged. Finally he said quietly, I should tell you something before we continue. Susanna waited. I do not treat intimacy as a duty. She blinked. My first marriage, she admitted softly, very much did. Something sharp flashed through his expression. Your husband was a fool. He was disappointed. Disappointment does not excuse cruelty. The firmness of his voice made her chest tighten. You speak as though you knew him. I knew enough. The Duke reached out then. His fingers brushed her cheek. Gentle, unexpectedly gentle. You have spent years being treated like an obligation, he said. I will not continue that tradition. Her breath caught. Why? Because the man everyone feared, the dragon who destroyed enemies without mercy, was looking at her with something dangerously close to tenderness. Because you deserve better than that, he said simply. Susanna's heart twisted painfully. He had no idea how undeserving she truly was. I must ask you one question, he continued quietly. What question? His hand slid from her cheek to her wrist, feeling the rapid pulse there. Do you want this? The question felt dangerously intimate. No one had asked her that before. Not Harold, not anyone. And suddenly the answer mattered. Far more than she expected. Yes, she whispered. His eyes darkened slightly. Then come here. The kiss that followed was nothing like the one in the chapel, not restrained, not distant, warm,
Slow.
exploratory. Susanna felt her breath catch as his arms wrapped around her, drawing her closer. He was patient, careful, as though he understood instinctively that she had learned to fear closeness. For the first time in her life, intimacy did not feel like a duty. It felt like something shared, something chosen. And later, when they lay tangled together in the soft darkness of the bed, Susanna realized with a shock that tears were sliding silently down her temples. The Duke noticed immediately. His hand brushed her hair. "Did I hurt you?" "No." "Then why are you crying?" She hesitated. "Because the truth sounded absurd. Because no one has ever cared whether I enjoyed it before." Something fierce flashed through his eyes. "Then they were unworthy of you." He pulled her closer against his chest. "You will never be treated like that again." His voice carried a quiet promise, and Susanna felt guilt rise in her throat like poison. Because this man, this feared, ruthless Duke, was showing her kindness. While she continued hiding the one truth that would break this fragile peace, outside the wind moved softly through the gardens. Inside the great house of Thornwood Park, the dragon slept with his new wife in his arms, unaware that the heir he believed would come from this marriage might never exist at all. Spring came slowly to a Thornwood Park. Snow melted into silver streams that ran through the gardens, and the vast estate began to wake from winter. With the changing season came a strange transformation inside the house itself, because the Duke of Thornwood began to change. Not dramatically, not in ways society would notice, but Susanna saw it. At first it was small things. He began seeking her out during the day, sometimes in the gardens, sometimes in the library, once even in the kitchens where he found her arguing gently with Mrs. Alderton about the household accounts. "You have reduced the wine order again," the housekeeper complained. "The previous order was excessive." "His Grace entertains frequently." "He does not." Both women turned when the Duke's voice entered the room. Mrs. Alderton stiffened. "Your Grace?" Crispin looked between them calmly. "My wife is correct." The housekeeper blinked. "You agree with her?" "I married her for her intelligence." He turned toward Susanna. "It would be foolish not to use it." And just like that, the argument ended. But moments like that began happening often. He asked her opinion on estate matters. On n'en dispute. On books he was reading. The Dragon of Thornwood, who was said to trust no one, had begun trusting her. The intimacy between them deepened as well. Their nights were no longer awkward negotiations. They became something else entirely. Laughter sometimes. Conversation. Slow kisses that had nothing to do with the bargain they had made. Yet every month the same quiet dread returned. Susanna waited. And every month her courses came. The first time she felt relief. The second time guilt. By the third month the guilt had become unbearable. She locked herself in her room and wept. Not because she wished for a child, but because the inevitable failure was drawing closer. The Duke had said nothing. Not once. But she knew he must be counting. The dragon missed nothing. One evening in early May she found him in the library. A book lay open across his lap. "You read poetry?" she asked softly. He looked up. "You sound surprised." "I am." He held up the book. "Keats." "My favorite." Something softened in her expression. Mine as well. She sat across from him. For a while they simply read together in comfortable silence. Then unexpectedly he spoke. "My father used to beat my mother." The words landed quietly in the warm room, but the weight behind them was immense. Susanna looked up slowly. "I did not know. Few people do." His voice was calm, too calm. "I was 8 the first time I tried to stop him." Her chest tightened. "He broke my arm." The words were delivered without emotion, as though recounting a distant memory. "I learned something that day," Crispin continued. "Good intentions are worthless without power." "So you decided to gain power?" "Yes." His gray eyes met hers. "And use it to ensure no woman I know is ever trapped the way she was." Suddenly everything made sense. Sir Oswald, the marriage offer, the fierce protectiveness. "You married me to save me," Susanna whispered. "Partly." The honesty stunned her. "And partly because," he continued quietly, "you were the first woman I met who did not seem afraid of me." I was terrified. "Yes." He closed the book slowly. "But you still agreed." His gaze lingered on her. "I admired that." The air between them shifted, dangerously. "You deserve honesty," Susanna said suddenly. The words slipped out before she could stop them. His brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Her heart began pounding. This was the moment. She could tell him. She should tell him. But fear closed around her throat. Fear that once the truth was spoken, everything would end. I mean, she said carefully, that you deserve a wife who gives you everything you hoped for. His expression softened in a way that made her stomach twist. Susanna. He set the book aside and crossed the room. When he reached her chair, he knelt. The Duke of Thornwood, one of the most powerful men in England, kneeling before her as though she were something precious. I have spent 3 years searching for someone, he said quietly. Someone capable of standing beside me. His hand closed gently around hers. I believe I found her. Emotion rose painfully in her chest, because she knew something he did not. The woman he believed he had chosen might already be failing him, and if the truth ever came to light, the dragon of Thornwood might not forgive the woman who had deceived him. The truth nearly revealed itself on a rainy evening in late May. Thunder rolled over the hills surrounding Thornwood Park, and the great house seemed unusually quiet. Susanna had been reading in the small sitting room adjoining the Duke's study when she heard the door open behind her. You are hiding. She turned. Crispin Mercer stood in the doorway, still in his riding coat, rain clinging to his dark hair and shoulders. I am reading. You are avoiding me. His tone was calm, but the sharpness in his eyes made her pulse quicken. I hardly think sitting in your own house qualifies as avoidance. He stepped closer. The scent of rain and leather followed him. You have been restless for days, he said. You watched me as though waiting for something. Her throat tightened. And what exactly do you believe I'm waiting for? The moment when you finally tell me the truth. The words struck like lightning. For a heartbeat, Susanna could not breathe. Truth about what? His gaze did not waver. You are not as calm as you pretend. I never claimed to be calm. You are afraid. Her voice sharpened. And what reason would I have to fear my own husband? Crispin studied her face carefully. As I told you before, I notice things. He moved closer until only the width of a table separated them. You flinch when the subject of children arises. Her fingers tightened around the book in her lap. You look relieved each month when your courses arrive. Her stomach dropped. And tonight, he continued quietly, you look as though you are preparing to say goodbye. The accuracy of his observations made her dizzy. He truly saw everything. Crispin, you are keeping something from me. The accusation was not harsh. If anything, it sounded sad. I am not, Susanna. Her name cut through the room with quiet authority. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes, those cold gray eyes that had terrified half of England, and yet now they held something far more unsettling. Concern. I gave you my word, he said softly. I would not hurt you. You have not. Then why do you behave as though I might? Her voice trembled despite her efforts. Because people always change when they discover disappointment. His expression shifted slightly. Disappointment? Yes. She rose from the chair abruptly. You want an heir? Yes. And if you do not receive one? He watched her carefully. That possibility exists in every marriage. You say that now, and I will say it later. Her breath shook. You cannot promise that. Why not? Because men always believe they can accept failure until it becomes real. The room fell silent. Rain battered the tall windows. Finally, Crispin spoke. Who convinced you of that? She laughed bitterly. My entire first marriage. Something dark flashed in his expression. Harold Fairfax was a coward. He was a man who wanted children, and blamed you when they did not come. Her eyes widened slightly. How did you? I investigated him. Of course he had. The Dragon of Thornwood left nothing unexplored. You deserve better than the life he gave you, Crispin said quietly. Better than disappointment. Her chest tightened painfully. You say that now. I say it because it is true. He moved closer again, this time close enough to touch her. Susanna. His voice softened. If there is something you wish to tell me, tell me. The invitation hung between them. This was the moment. The last safe moment. She could confess everything. About the doctor, about the diagnosis, about the certainty she had carried for years. That she could never give him what he wanted. But fear held her still. Because if she said the words, she might lose the only person who had ever truly seen her. Her voice faltered. I am only afraid of disappointing you. Crispin studied her face for a long moment. Then something changed in his expression. Not suspicion, understanding. You cannot disappoint me, he said quietly. You have already given me more than I expected from this marriage. And what is that? His hand rose slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Peace. The word surprised her. This house used to feel like a fortress, he continued. Cold, empty. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw. Now it feels like a home. Her eyes burned with sudden tears. You cannot mean that. I do. His voice dropped lower. And whether we have children or not. He hesitated, as though choosing his next words carefully. You are no longer simply my Duchess, Susanna. Her heart began pounding. Then what am I? For a moment he simply looked at her, and something dangerous flickered in his gray eyes. You are becoming the one person in this world I cannot afford to lose. The confession hung in the air between them. Heavy, unavoidable, and for the first time since their marriage began, Susanna understood something terrifying. The Dragon of Thornwood had not only married her, he was beginning to fall in love with her, and when the truth about her barrenness finally surfaced, it might destroy them both. The truth came 3 nights later, not through confession, through discovery. Susanna had gone to the Duke's study searching for a book. Crispin was in London attending a parliamentary session, and the house felt strangely empty without him. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows as she stepped inside the room he rarely allowed anyone to enter. Maps covered the walls. Documents lined the massive desk. Files arranged with obsessive precision. Susanna hesitated. She should leave. But curiosity, the same dangerous curiosity that had once led her to accept a Duke's impossible bargain, pulled her closer. One file caught her attention. Sir Oswald Breck? Her breath caught. Inside were pages of meticulous notes. Every threat Oswald had made, every debt he had hidden, every cruelty he had inflicted upon her during those final months at Breck Manor. At the bottom of the page was a single line written in the Duke's precise hand. Resolution, marriage to subject, protection secured. Susanna's knees weakened. He had known. He had known exactly what Oswald intended to do to her, and he had married her to stop it. Tears blurred her vision. She had thought this marriage a transaction, but to him, it had also been salvation. Her fingers trembled as she closed the file, and that was when she saw another document, her name written clearly across the top, Susanna Fairfax. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside were letters, records, investigations, everything he had learned about her life before Thornwood Park. But one detail stood out immediately. Medical history unknown, records destroyed in fire. The breath left her lungs. He did not know. The doctor's diagnosis, her supposed barrenness, none of it had reached him. For months she had carried guilt for deceiving him. Yet he had never known the truth in the first place. Relief and dread collided violently inside her chest. She could tell him now. She could finally be honest. The study door opened. I suspected you would find that eventually. Susanna turned. Crispin Mercer stood in the doorway, travel-worn and silent. Rain clung to his coat. His eyes were unreadable. You came back early. I finished my business sooner than expected. He stepped inside. His gaze moved briefly over the open files, then returned to her. You have questions? Yes. Her voice shook. Why did you marry me? His answer came immediately. Because you needed protection. That was not the only reason. No. He approached slowly. I admired your strength. And now? Now the question trembled between them. His gray eyes softened. Now I know I made the right decision. Emotion surged painfully through her chest. There is something I must tell you. His expression grew serious. Then tell me. The words came out as a whisper. A doctor once told me I could never have children. Silence fell, heavy, unforgiving. Susanna braced herself, for anger, for disappointment, for the quiet destruction she had feared since the beginning. Instead, Crispin exhaled slowly. And you believed him? Yes. And that is why you feared telling me. She nodded. His gaze searched her face. You thought I would cast you aside. Yes. For a moment he said nothing. Then he crossed the room and took her trembling hands in his. You foolish woman. Her eyes widened. I never married you only for an heir. But you said... I said what was necessary to convince you. His thumb brushed the back of her hand. I wanted a wife who could stand beside me. His voice lowered. And somewhere along the way I discovered I wanted you. Her heart nearly stopped. You do not mean that. I do. His hand lifted to her cheek. I have spent 33 years destroying the men who hurt women. His voice softened. But loving one. That is far more terrifying. Tears filled her eyes. And if I truly cannot give you children... Crispin smiled faintly. Then the Thornwood line ends with me. You would accept that? I would accept anything. His forehead rested gently against hers. Except losing you. The confession broke the last wall inside her chest. She kissed him then, not carefully, not cautiously, but with the desperate certainty of a woman who finally believed she was loved. Outside, the rain had stopped. Moonlight spilled through the tall study windows, and in that quiet moment inside Thornwood Park, the dragon of Thornwood claimed something far more valuable than an heir. He claimed the woman he loved.